Hello, friend. The Mystical American Patriots Society is transmitting to you from beneath 4 million cubic feet of solid granite, in the burning heart of the Yellowstone caldera. This is a variety program for normal sandwich-eating Americans with some concerns about living in a deranged, post-Christian technocracy. So, keep your third eye on the sky and your ear to the ground, as Sumo and Smokestack connect your main brain vein to a higher plane. Are you ready? Stand by.
Oh, man.
Are you okay? Smokestack, are you okay?
Sumo.
Look, just open your eyes, keep calm, look at the light.
I'm covered in slime.
Look at the light.
I don't know where I
All right.
am. There's a pink beam of light.
Just
What is
hold
this?
on. Just grab the sides
Okay.
and hold on.
All right.
You need to be grounded.
Where am I right now? And what are we
Okay.
doing here? And what is this place?
Okay, calm down.
I'm freaking out, man.
I know. You are a clone.
Well, that's good, I guess.
You are a clone. Number
Okay.
one.
All right.
All right. We have artificially created you to serve in the Mystical American Patriot Society.
Oh.
You are currently presiding over one of our transmissions. Are you okay?
I think I can. Is that why there's a control panel in front of me?
That's why you will find that you have been your nervous system has been implanted with all the coding necessary to run a audio visual program.
Oh, man. That's heavy.
Right. You
okay.
can't do much else. You're a very stripped down model, but
Oh, man.
you have been implanted with some basic blacksmithing skills in case that it becomes necessary.
Okay.
You know how to knit and you know how to run a control panel.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll get by with that. Maybe we can talk about some upgrades.
Yes. Well, that's coming. You're the latest model, number 71.
Okay.
71 of planned to be 90.
Mm-hmm.
But we'll see. We've been having some production problems.
Okay.
If you find that your fingers are a little numb later, just tell us. We know how to fix that.
Okay.
We also made you Jewish. You're the only Jewish one we've made so far. We're going to see how that works. We'll put you on a strict kosher diet.
Okay. All right. This is
But
a lot.
you can't leave that room ever.
Me. Ever?
Right.
Okay.
If you see this, if sunlight hits the clones, they begin to break down. So you have to stay in the bunker.
All right. I'll stay in the bunker. There's books here.
Lots of books for you to read. We're very, very.
Do I know how to read?
You know how to read.
Okay. Good. All right. Well, good. Well, so it appears that we're
you're also
recording.
fluent in Cantonese.
Oh. Ni hao.
Ni hao. Yeah.
So it appears we're recording a show right now. What's the
We
show
are.
about? What is it? What's it called?
This is the Mystical American Patriot Society. This is our broadcast.
Okay.
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 All right, that's what this is about. This is helping normal Americans
Mm-hmm.
who are a little confused about what's happening in the world and the country right now.
Mm-hmm.
We're helping them, and this is also we're helping them on a political level,
Yeah.
on a cultural level,
Mm-hmm.
personal level, but we're also helping them on a spiritual and metaphysical level.
Cool.
Okay, this is a show for people who are, let's say, conservative,
Mm-hmm.
right? They're a little bit. They're not like extreme right wing people. They may be, I don't know, but they're just let's say right of center,
Okay.
pretty normal people,
Mm-hmm.
or maybe they're center, and but they've experienced some things they don't know how to fit into their worldview.
Okay.
Like maybe they've seen a ghost.
All right.
Maybe they've accidentally levitated.
Now, see,
Maybe
I have accidentally levitated, or at least that memory's been implanted in my brain during the cloning process.
Yes,
but I'm also like a Christian, even though I'm Jewish ethnically. I'm a Christian. So is this podcast going to help me like square the fact that I'm a Christian, but I've also levitated?
Yeah, that's the aim. Yes. So let's say you don't know where to put the fact that you have conflicting worldviews. There you go. That's a great way to put it.
Okay.
If you have conflicting a worldview that conflicts with your experience, we're going to try to put it together.
That sounds like a really helpful and necessary thing in our day and age.
It's very helpful and necessary. If you have had positive experiences with crystal magic,
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't mean that you have to become a new age hippie.
Mm-hmm.
It's okay. You can still be a truck driver.
Yeah.
And or you can still be a welder, right? Or you can still work on your oil rig and also understand that sometimes people levitate due to crystal magic.
Okay.
Or whatever it is. I don't think actually crystal magic causes levitation. I'm just using that as this, extreme example.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Just illustrating a point. I get you.
So this is for truckers. This is for welders. This is for oil rig guys.
Yep.
This is also, though, for Wiccans,
Mm-hmm.
for astrologers. This is for hipsters.
Yeah.
This is for anyone in America that has questions.
What about Southern Baptists?
For Southern Baptists,
awesome.
it's for Ramakrishnas, really. If they want to, we can
listen.
help them out a lot.
Okay.
We can help out everybody. This is in our house. There are many rooms.
Okay.
And if in one of those rooms you see a rainbow snake, or a thunderbird,
okay,
or a bunch of gray aliens trying to probe you at night,
scary.
Then you're welcome, right? Mm-hmm. This is a place for normal people that are trying to deal with some not normal things.
Right.
Okay. And we're going to bring America back. I don't know if we're going to make it great again, but we're going to at least make it sane again.
Hey, since I know I'm not the boss around here, but since I'm the engineer, do I get to contribute a little something to the program too?
Of course. Every clone is given a certain set of interest and specialties.
Okay.
And a library full of books. If you look behind you, you'll find a library completely full of books.
Oh, fantastic.
About things to educate yourself that you can then help the rest of it with after. So you'll have a segment during the show also.
Mm-hmm. Oh, good.
We will talk about, and most of the clones like to call theirs people skills or something like that.
Okay. Oh, wait.
But you can choose your own name.
Okay, there's a button here. I'll try it when it's time to do that.
Yes.
The
people
great.
skills button. Now, that is a little weird because you've never encountered an actual human being before, and you will not because your immune system is very poor.
Okay, I'll
and
try
so if
to
you
imagine.
touch other skin, you will begin to die.
Okay.
It's like we made you accidentally with AIDS from the start.
Oh, man. Okay, I'm going to stay in my bunker.
You don't have any white blood cells, or very few. So you have to be careful. That's why we put you in the hermetically sealed bunker.
Okay, good deal. That sounds good. Well, great. So, I'm really hoping that at some point, as we're doing all this, we can help people sort of break free of the technocratic control grid that is apparently placed upon humankind by the forces of modernism and globalism. Do you think we can do that?
We can do that. And one of the main ways we're going to do that is helping people see through that matrix they impose on you. We're going to help you see through all of the mental traps they've put you in.
Yeah.
Right? So
you know what we should do? You know what else we should do?
We
should empower people to do things for themselves that currently like corporations and governments do for them and make them helpless and useless.
We should do that. That's 100% agree. The programming is already working 100% on you.
Awesome.
Hey, you might want to wipe some of that extra goo off, though.
Okay. Yeah, it's on my face.
The goo's on. Yeah, the goo. It's fine. It's fine.
I'll catch a shower by the next show. Yeah.
Artificial wombs have a lot of goo. It's fine, especially when you grow a full person in the womb, like an adult human. It's an extra step that took a lot of time.
Is that the first gross looking thing back there?
The first couple of 100 versions of you, they just died. Don't look in the backyard.
Okay. I don't want to see that.
Yeah.
I don't want to see that.
Okay.
Well, I'm glad I made it.
Yes.
Fantastic.
So look, here's how Mystical American Patriot Society got started. This is the origin story.
Oh boy.
Okay. So, growing up in America, in rural America, I had rural American ideas, right? Mm-hmm. And I still largely do. But the problem was when I was a young teenager in the middle of a farm at night, I encountered a UFO at a very close distance.
Whoa.
And at that time, I remember thinking, well, if that's real, anything could be real. Because it was so otherworldly. Mm-hmm. And I don't even know if it actually came from another world, as in a planet, or maybe from another realm. It was so strange. And the rest of my life has been spent trying to to fit these things together in a way that makes sense. And I know that there's a lot of people out there. In fact, I would probably say the majority of people who are normal sandwich eating Americans, right?
Yeah.
They go to work, they do the thing, but there's something in their life that doesn't fit. Maybe they saw a ghost. Maybe they saw a UFO too. Maybe they accidentally levitated one time.
Right.
Maybe they saw a Thunderbird. Maybe someone did a faith healing on them. Maybe they've experienced telepathy. Maybe they have seen a Bigfoot. And so they're normal, they're very normal, but there's something in their life that they can't fit together, and we're gonna put it all together. We're gonna make the person whole again, right?
Sweet.
We're a metaphysical pothole filling service. In your worldview, you have potholes that are broken, and there's something that doesn't fit, and we're gonna put them all together right here on this show.
Are we also gonna build an army?
Well, we're not like this is not a terrorist organization. Number one,
Okay.
if you're looking to do terrorist activities, this is not the place for you. Okay. In fact, we seek to de-radicalize you in that case. You can keep listening because we're going to de-radicalize you.
Okay, that'll be good. That'll be good.
But we are going to eventually mobilize. Yes.
Okay.
We're going to have an army, quote unquote, of sprinter vans.
Yep.
And converted minivans and RVs that will travel around America, helping people, preaching the good news of aliens are not necessarily from other planets. We're going to maybe we'll march on Washington at some point.
Okay.
I don't know. We'll see. But there will definitely be some form of there'll probably be ranks. There'll probably be ranks at some point.
Okay, great.
I mean, there already are ranks as an aside, just they're not publicly available yet.
Gotcha.
For those of us in the organization, there will, at some point we have to build some bases that are public, like the Masons, the Freemasons.
So you can visit them.
You can visit them. Right now they're all underground.
Right.
And they're covered in leaves at the top so that no one can see them.
Ah, yeah.
But yeah, there's a lot to do in the future, and we have a lot of ground to cover. This is only the beginning, but it's going to grow.
Well, I'm just glad you said that we're not a terrorist organization, because I was starting to get worried.
We're not a terrorist organization. Now, as a clone, you would be a very poor terrorist since you can't go out in the sunlight.
Yeah, I'd be terrible at that.
Right, you'd have to be a moonlight-based only terrorist.
Yeah, it really limits your options.
Yeah, and especially with the poor immune system, that is very difficult. Now, we do have a more robust clone version.
Okay.
The problem is we can only get one of the two. Much like most of America, for some reason, our cloning program has bifurcated the jock and the nerd archetypes.
Oh, man.
We can't put them together. We can make one that's very physically robust, but he just screams at the walls all day.
So I'm a nerd.
You can't reason with him. Yes. But you're a prototype where we've tried to merge them together. We use the Jewishness as sort of a bridge between the jock and the nerd for you. That was an experiment. We're going to see how it goes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I do feel like I've got decent muscle tone, so maybe some of it worked.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
I think so. And now I think your heart, you'll find, is very, very small. So don't run.
Don't run. Okay.
Don't run.
Got to keep my blood pressure up.
Right.
Okay.
So yeah, we're going to do a lot of things here in the Mystical American Patriot Society. MAPS for short, or MAPSOC if you prefer. And it's going to be good. And we welcome everyone to this, except people that are trying to turn it into a terrorist organization, which it is not.
Okay, good. We'll kick them out.
Yes.
What about crop circle people?
Crop circle people are welcome if they repent.
Okay.
Okay. This is my own personal bias. In years in the paranormal supernatural spheres, I have been able to get along well with everyone except crappies. Crappies are just so annoying.
I can imagine.
There's a couple of them that are okay, and don't take it personally. If you're listening and you're a crappie, you're the exception. I promise. But
that's good that one can tell themselves
but
that.
on average, it's just like, and then the mother goddess came down, and the plasma field rose, and the crops laid down, and sick, and I fed a hole again. It's always some British woman. British women love crop circles for some reason.
That's weird.
Yeah, older, spinstery British women are almost 100% guaranteed to be into crop circles.
That's good to know if I ever head over there in my bubble.
Yes, yeah. Well, we'll have a tunnel for you.
Okay.
Have a tunnel for you.
Fantastic.
We're still building the tunnel system. So anyway, how the show typically goes. Now, we'll probably have some special shows in the future where we interview new Maps members.
Mm-hmm.
As you guys come on board to the show, we'll get you registered. We'll get you your patch.
Mm-hmm.
We'll get you your insignia.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Maybe your marching orders, whatever.
Okay. Good deal.
And then we'll bring you on. And then occasionally we'll interview new Maps members just to see how they're going. Maybe we'll do that.
Mm-hmm.
But in general, the way these shows go is we'll do a little bit of a philosophy bit,
mm-hmm.
maybe a little bit of a spirituality bit,
mm-hmm.
right? And then we'll go into something a little more practical. Let's say this is a point that typically clones take up.
Oh, good.
Where they talk about something quite practical, like maybe how to make knives, maybe how to refill your own bullets, right? Maybe how to darn your own socks.
Okay,
right?
cool.
Think you really need to know practical skills that the American needs to know to be set free from the corporate cage that we're put in that says you have to buy everything all the time.
Yep.
And then at the end, we're going to talk about something a little more esoteric and spooky, right? Something a little bit people may not know about. People that may not know about. Like today, for instance, we're going to talk one about the uselessness of philosophy. Okay. Number two, we're going to talk about architecture and city planning. I think that's what you were programmed to talk about.
Yeah,
today.
I've got it right here in my brain.
And
Strangely.
then number three, we're going to start off with a nice. We're going to start the show off, the first episode, with a nice little introduction to ghosts and hauntings, because that's probably the most common paranormal thing that people are familiar with. If someone out there has a paranormal experience, it is overwhelmingly likely that it was a ghost or some form of haunting. And UFOs and those things are much more rare. But ghosts are the most common because,
Ooh.
I think people die more than aliens come from other planets.
Okay.
Pretty sure on that. I'm gonna stake my flag right there. People die more than things come from other planets.
Okay. I'm gonna do my homework and hold you to that, Sumo.
Right.
Cool. So what do you want to start with?
Well, I should clarify. We have to use code names for various non-terrorist related reasons.
Yeah.
Now your actual name is Smokestack because you're a clone and have no parents.
Okay.
But my code name is Sumo. That is an homage to the great sport of sumo wrestling, of which I have participated in the past, though I am not Japanese. And so we will, and when you sign on as a Maps member, you will receive your code name too in the mail in an unmarked envelope. But so just so you all know, okay? Now, so we're going to start with a bit of the philosophy bit, and this is about why philosophy is sort of dumb.
All right.
And I mean that in all cases: political, academic, spiritual philosophy, theology. Okay, it's also. I'm not going to prove that using theology itself.
Okay.
Okay. So this is a big problem in America. Is Americans are very divided. And we're divided by a lot of philosophical issues, I would say. And this is where this idea of incarnation becomes the central focus. The thesis of this little bit is that incarnation is where all philosophical problems are solved. All right, so I want you to think about this. Think about this, Smokestack, and listeners think about this. All right, you pick up a flower. Go outside, pick up a flower. It's perfectly simple. There's nothing complicated at all about a flower. You pick it up, it's beautiful, it smells lovely, produces pollen. The bees like it, right? It's a perfectly simple thing. But then go pick up a book on botany. Okay.
Yep.
And now you've got this tome of graphs and charts and diagrams, and you'll have cutaways of the flower showing tubules and microstructures and filaments. And then it'll go into the reproductive cycle about the flower. And then you'll read all about the evolutionary origins of the flower and how it comes from a seed. And you'll learn about its molecular chemistry, and then the DNA inside that. And then you'll learn about all the subsystems and the cell work and all the different cells and the interconnected, system of how these different cell systems work together. And then that chemistry the molecular chemistry is described in can be described in terms of physics, and we'll talk about how the particles stick together. And it just goes on and on forever. It's endless. And you can spend your whole life reading tome after tome after tome about one simple flower. Right?
Right.
And you think, and then you think, goodness, all I wanted to do was smell the flower. And it's turned into this whole mess.
Yeah.
And that is because the flower isn't complicated. What makes it complicated is trying to explain it. Right? Which is to say that things become complicated only when reality is attempted to be translated into words, into syntax and symbols.
Okay.
That's when reality, and that is an ultimately impossible exercise, which is why it's futile.
Maybe that's why people argue about it so much too.
That's why you can argue forever. And everyone has a logically coherent position, more or less. And this is why the arguments of philosophy never end. They go on and on. Which is the best type of economic system? Which is the best type of politics? Which is the best religion? Which is the best anything? Like, what's the meaning of life? And it just goes on and on forever. And it's a completely futile exercise, because all of it, every theological book written is basically trying to translate a flower into words, which is impossible, right? And this, I'm channeling a little the people for clarity. I'm a Christian person, though I'm channeling a bit of Buddhism here, a bit of Alan Watts. Really, this is sort of a point he made quite well. But you cannot. It is impossible to put reality into words. And all attempts to do so result in a certain kind of nonsense. Which is why philosophy has had an abysmal failure. Right? We've been arguing over the same philosophical problems. The problems posed by Aristotle and Plato are still basically the same problems.
Right.
And we've been at it for about 3,000 years now. We're getting nowhere. Yeah, but philosophers, especially academic philosophers, which are the worst type,
right,
like to somehow pretend that makes them better, that they've had no progress because they're working on a particularly hard problem, rather than just admitting that they're doing nonsense and they should just go get honest jobs. The same is true, honestly, for theologians. The reason, here's the secret about theology is that they're all wrong. All dogma is wrong. What you've done when you make dogma or theology is you're a child drawing a very poor picture of a tree and then trying to get people to worship your picture of the tree rather than focus on the tree itself. Because everything you've described in words cannot contain the fullness of it. And it always has imperfections. It always has things that don't fit. So all systems fail because all systems All belief systems fail because all systems cannot contain the fullness of reality within them. This is the starting premise of Maps. And this is why Maps this is why we're the mystical American patriot. Because in mysticism, in the mystical mind, you can go beyond this thing of just language to a realm of perception and immediate knowing.
Oh, okay.
It cannot be described in words. So that's why I wanted to address this first, because people say, why mystical? Why mystical? Well, mystical because the academic, logical, sort of reason-based approach that we've all been taught from childhood, like be logical, scientific, be reasonable, right? That's fine to a point, but ultimately you get to a place where you're trying to describe a flower in words, and it's impossible. And not only is it impossible, after doing it, after you've read the 70 tomes of botany, your ability to enjoy the flower is in no way enhanced. Right? It really, you wonder, like, what was the point of all that? Nor is your ability. I mean, the flower is already taking care of itself fine. Your ability to like propagate the flower, regrow the flower, is at best only marginally enhanced by these 70 tomes, right? So that is why the mystical mindset is needed. So think about all the problems that we come up with. Like, let's take philosophy for a second, not to mention theology, because that just goes forever. But here's some problems of philosophy that are unresolved. Problems of like qualia, epistemology, principle of individuation, Theseus' ship, the mind-body problem, final cause versus sufficient cause, realism and idealism, on and on and on.
Yep.
But notice that none of that whatsoever disturbs the existence of a rock.
Yeah.
The rock has solved all philosophical problems.
It's still just doing its rock stuff.
It's still just doing its thing. The flower and the tree have solved all philosophical problems. They exist. There they are. All the contradictions have come together.
They just don't explain it to you.
Right. And that is because it cannot be explained. And that's why God never wrote anything down. Even Jesus in the Bible, the only time we see him writing anything is in dirt. And it doesn't tell us what he said. And it's in a medium that is immediately washed away when people step on it.
Interesting.
Right? God himself never writes anything because what he wants to tell you cannot be communicated in words.
What about the 10 Commandments?
Well, I mean, someone else, the ones that he wrote himself were broken, right?
Oh, okay. But I mean, he did write them.
He did, but that's sort of I think that's sort of knowing that they would be smashed, right? I think that he wouldn't have written them had he not known they would be smashed, because that's sort of a symbolic thing right there. Okay. When God if God were to write it down, or that man would somehow destroy it, something like that.
The word became flesh and we crucified him.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So that's why the word must become flesh. That's why Christ can say, I am the truth. Mm-hmm. The truth is not a set of words. The truth is not a set of dictums. It's not a set of doctrines. The truth is an incarnate person. Mm-hmm. Right? Because the truth transcends all language. And that's why it's the only thing that makes sense. That's also why, for example, that this solves the problem of the war in heaven. Imagine you have all these principles. You go out in nature, you've got hot and cold, you've got light and dark, you've got male and female, you've got hard and soft, you've got living and dead. Mm-hmm. All of these things. You've got these principalities and powers, right? These what would you call them? It's a bit hard to explain, but like if you take the idea that like cold is like a thing, right? Mm-hmm. Or soft is like a thing, and you've got like and they're all of these various things that could be in existence, right? They're all at war. Okay. About what could happen. All the possibilities are at war. That's what the war in heaven's about. But yet in the human person, they all come together in perfect harmony. For the human person has male and female. It has the ability of light and the ability of dark, to experience both. It has hardness and softness. It has life and death. It has all of them together, right, in itself. And that's why Christ says the kingdom of heaven is within you, right? Because the culmination of the universe and all the warring principles and all the various possibilities distill down into a perfect harmony in the human person, which is why God incarnates into one. Is this making sense?
Sort of.
Sort of.
I have many questions, but I'm just holding them.
All right, let's shoot some questions. Start with some questions.
Okay, so where does this view leave your assessment of Scripture, of the Bible?
It leaves it in a good place. It is. So okay, how about, have you ever heard the idea of a koan?
No.
Okay, a koan is a beautiful idea from the Zen tradition, and it is a puzzle that that has no answer except to go beyond the answer. And what I mean by that is, so here's a classic one. They're little tiny stories that teach you something, right? Okay, so a classic one is a disciple came to the master and said, "Master, please teach me to be enlightened," right? And the man said, "Well, have you finished your rice?" And he says, "Yes." The master says, "Then go wash your bowl." That's the end of the story. Okay, so he asked for enlightenment, and he's told, "Well, just go do the next thing," right? Go do that. So there. It's not really. It doesn't really have a riddle. It sort of is a riddle. But what the master is saying in that thing is, well, to be enlightened is to just do the next thing and realize that is where enlightenment exists, right? It's not like some higher thing. It's like you're already in it. Okay.
Right.
The Bible has many passages that function like that. The Bible is a very complicated book.
I agree with you there.
But let's take the commandment, the first commandment: "Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, soul, and mind." Okay, so that's an interesting one because you get put instantly in a double bind, because you're being commanded to do something which will only be acceptable if it's done voluntarily. Right? You cannot command, so if you command someone to love you, it doesn't work. Like, you must love me. Right. Because the only kind of love that is acceptable to anybody is that which is done voluntarily. Right? And so God gives you this command, not because God is foolish, but because he's very, very clever. And he wants you to see that you cannot love on purpose. Right. Right? And there's a lot of Scripture is like that. It's like it's all pointing to Christ, to the incarnation, to this revelation. Yep. But it is all it's all like a finger pointing at the moon. It's saying, look over there at the moon, but people get focused on the finger. Again, it's the idea of they've drawn a picture of the tree and they're focused on that rather than the tree itself. Right. Right. And so all of Scripture, I would say, is very useful to the point that it points you to Christ. But at the minute it points you away, then it becomes worthless. So if the Scripture's not pointing us to Christ, we're misusing it. You're misusing it. You may as well just burn it. The worst idols are not those made of clay and stone, but those made of ideas. Right? You form all these. This is the whole history of people killing each other in the name of Jesus. Right? We have to go to war and kill him because his ideas about Jesus are slightly different than mine. Right. Because you've created this idol of your ideas, and you're trying to instead of living incarnationally, where the rock solves all philosophical problems, you're trying to say, well, no, I've solved them in my words. Gotcha. Right? Here they are. And that can never happen. Well, this kind of speaks to the idea that there's so much within Christian doctrine that really can't be explained, like the nature of the Trinity. Right. You can't, anytime you try to explain how that works, you end up in some bizarre heresy. Yes, because what it is now, but notice that again, in the actual physical person,
Mm-hmm.
the idea of multiplicity and singularity is completely fine.
Yeah.
I mean, we contain a multitude all the time. I mean, there's multiple parts of you.
Mm-hmm.
Number one, and then number two, in a very physical sense, you have two hemispheres of your brain which have independent consciousnesses, basically.
Interesting.
And there's the if you stroke victims,
Mm-hmm.
or they're not stroke victims, epilepsy victims. One of the treatments is to separate the two lobes of the brain, because one of the causes of epilepsy is incoherent crosstalk between the two hemispheres.
Interesting.
Okay. Now, what you do at one side of the brain controls sight and hand motions.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's like hand-eye coordination. Another side of the brain controls hearing and speech, right? Which makes sense because those are connected. You need to hear what someone says and then respond.
Right.
If you take a person that's had, now these people seem completely normal on the outside, but if you take a person that's had their brain separated down the middle,
Mm-hmm.
like I said, they go about their lives in a very normal way. But then,
can they read out loud?
So if you then hold up a picture, let's say, of a pineapple,
mm-hmm.
and you say, "Please tell me what this is." Okay. Their eyes can't talk to their mouth. So though they see the picture of the pineapple, they'll say, I don't know what it is.
Weird.
Tell me what this is. I don't know what it is. But with their hand, they can write the word pineapple, even though their mouth is saying, I don't know what it is.
Ooh.
Right? That's what I mean. The physical person has solved all these problems. You are 2 in 1, 3 in 1. Like, because the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, like the Son may be thought of. This is from Augustine, I believe. I sometimes get my church fathers' philosophies confused, but Augustine said the Son is God's own self-knowledge. So God knows Himself, and that is the Son, and the love between God and God's self-knowledge is the Holy Spirit, mm-hmm. which is very similar to the human person you have one hemisphere of the brain, the other hemisphere, and then they're connected, mm-hmm. and that connection makes the full person, right? Mm-hmm. But so all of these problems are like, you cannot speak about the Trinity, but you already are one, right? And so all of these things are solved in the physical world, in the incarnation. That's why I always hold to the incarnation as the point, right? People that talk about these various dogmas and these paths to salvation and all, it's like, yes, he said, that's all fine, I suppose, but the point is the incarnation. Like, that's where everything is solved. Mm-hmm. And that's the answer to every question, really. That's the answer to every question is this idea. So that's the beginning. That's why the mystical frame of mind is necessary, because the mystical frame of mind, the mystical American patriot, is where you go beyond. You go beyond the fingers pointing at the moon, and you just go jump on the moon. Mm-hmm. You take your Apollo rocket to the moon.
Do you believe that the Bible is infallible in the traditional Christian sense?
Well, it's a bit of a hard. I always thought that question was sort of weird, because it's like, well, that depends on what you. I mean, it doesn't mean anything until someone reads it, right?
Okay.
The words on the page don't mean anything, and then when I read it, what I come away with it is certainly not infallible. So I've always felt that was a weird statement, because I don't know how. Like, it can't be word, unless it's read, it doesn't mean anything. Because if it's just words on a page floating in space, then what is the meaning?
Well,
right?
But the Bible doesn't try to break down and dissect the mysteries of the Trinity and of free will and predestination. It just presents them as here's the rock, So both your freedom to choose Christ and your chosenness of God are presented side by side, and it's never explained. So it seems like it's that by the inspiration of God, the Bible is written in such a way that it's not going to try to take something that shouldn't be expressed in words and can't be expressed in words, and it just leaves it there this is the flower, this is the rock.
Yes, and I agree that it's inspired. I don't. The word infallible is just problematic from a definitional point.
Okay.
Like, I'm not sure. That's sort of like when people say, what would be a good example? It's sort of like when people say, when people talk about, let's say from a Catholic perspective, if someone talks about transubstantiation, it's like, do you believe in transubstantiation? It's like you gotta say that you do.
You gotta make all the definitions, yeah.
And then, but then you ask them about it, and then you don't even, when you're finished, you don't even understand what it is you're supposed to be agreeing to.
Gotcha.
You're like, what? What is this? What right. Substance? And then it is, but almost every Catholic has no idea what it even means. But they're supposed to admit that they believe in it, and that's my problem with the infallibility thing.
Right. So
I don't think most people even understand what that would mean, and I don't even think I would understand what that would mean.
So
see, this is the trouble. This is why the devils are legalistic, because they want to trap you in words. Like the devils are always. Are the worst legalists. One of the biggest tricks the devil ever pulled is not to convince people he didn't exist, but to convince people that God is the legalistic one.
Oh.
Like the devil's up there like, see, I got him now. He violated commandment X and Y and Z, and now he's mine forever. And then if the guy just says, hey, I'm sorry, God. Oh, okay, no problem. The devil's like, what? No, he broke rule X, Y, and Z. He's like, shut up. I don't care. The letter killeth and the spirit giveth life, as Paul said. It's not that the letter is useless.
Right.
And again, it's not that philosophy is useless or theology is useless. It's only useless when you take it seriously. It's supposed to be for fun. Like the whole point, if you're doing philosophy and you're not having fun with it, then what are you doing? Like that's why in this show, we will say a lot of things that may be a little silly, but we're exploring ideas. And we're going to places that most people don't go. We're being non-drug using psychonauts here.
Okay,
like
cool.
The point of philosophy is to explore and to have fun with it. Once you do a philosophy and you say, aha, now I'm going to build my nation state off this philosophy, you inevitably become a tyranny.
Okay.
Because your philosophy is dumb, and it doesn't work in the like. It may point to something true, but it isn't truth itself.
Oh, that's a key difference.
Right. It may point to something true, but it is not truth itself. It may be a finger pointing at the moon, but it's not the moon.
Right.
Right?
Words are not the logos.
Words are not the logos, despite the logos meaning word, right?
Yeah.
Because the only way the logos could ever be truly expressed was to become incarnate. All the rest of it was preamble.
Gotcha.
Right? So that's where we start from in the Mystical American Patriot Society. We're going to teach you how to go up. We're going to bring your mind up out of the realm of just words. Because all public education does is teach to think in words. And words are very slow. Like, you think about this. People think they can't do physics, right? I have some training in physics. People think they can't do physics because they can't get over the math of it, right? And the math is just a sort of language. But if you throw a baseball at them, they can catch it,
right?
Which is a highly complex physical calculation, and they do it without even thinking.
Okay.
Like when a lion chases a gazelle, and the gazelle turns sharply, and then he turns more to head him off at the pass. The lion is doing superb physical calculations. He's hitting his target. When you hit a baseball with a bat, you've done a very complex physical calculation. You would have to, do some doing to make a computer do. Like that's why robots have a lot of trouble doing things in the physical world, because you need rapid calculations of physical things happening right now. That's why robots have so much trouble.
Interesting.
So the human person, again, the incarnation, what you actually are, has no trouble whatsoever with physics. The only problem comes when people try to put it in words. right? You understand that hot thing. You understand all of the principles are there.
Right.
You understand the hot and the cold, and the more energetic is the hot, and it can cause burns, and it can cause increased pressure. And you understand light, and you understand motion and gravity, and all of this stuff because you get through the world just fine. Right. The only trouble is coming when you try to put it into words. And that's true of everything.
Okay.
Right? And so we're going to teach you to go beyond that into just knowing, into knowing God like you know how to catch a baseball, and not knowing God like a physics equation.
Ah.
Right?
Okay.
That's the goal here. That's the goal. So that's a good introduction, and that's also why we wear esoteric socks.
That would explain these strange socks I'm wearing.
I ran into a big problem this weekend. I had 5 non-matching pairs of Bigfoot socks. I could only find one of each.
So did you wear
all 5? I was like, what are the odds of that? Well, I didn't wear one of it because there were 2 different. One was green and one was like yellow, and green and yellow on each foot.
Well, I feel like if they both have a Bigfoot on them, they'd match.
Well, but here's the thing. One of them had a Bigfoot being sucked up in an alien's tractor beam, and the other one had a Bigfoot just roaming around a campground. And I feel like alien sort of
threw the balance off.
I did, yeah. If it was just Bigfoots, it would be fine. Now, I have worn one Bigfoot and one Nessie sock before, and that seems to work okay.
Okay, yeah. They're kind of like a couple.
Yeah, because they're both cryptids. Aliens aren't really cryptids, though, which is the problem.
Gotcha.
Yeah, but, so a little bit of sumo wrestling here, a little bit of not philosophy, a lot of sock wearing. Okay. That's what we're about.
Good deal.
All right, so now let's try out your programming. Let me put in the things here. Let me do the typing. Okay, Okay, I believe I uploaded your programming there. Did you feel anything?
What would you say?
Oh,
yeah, it's working. It's working.
People skills.
We have people skills.
Ooh, we do have people skills.
See what I mean?
We were talking about, thinking in words and doing physics in math, and I'm thinking to myself, how do we get into that frame of mind where we think we can't do physics because we can't do the math?
Right.
And I think a part of that is the environment in which we live and grow. The things around us. And the way we live affects the way we think about ourselves. Okay? And I think that one of the huge chunks of that is architecture. Okay?
This is already going so much better than the previous model. He started saying, I tried this last week with model number 70. And he said, one of the problems is architecture. He kept saying it just like that.
Oh, I can see why you killed him.
Then he eventually had a stroke.
Oh, well, good.
In the backyard. But you're doing great so far.
Well, thanks. Well, that's exciting because I've never actually read these books, but the data's somehow been encoded into my brain, which is pretty neat.
Yeah, that was a difficult process, but yeah.
So, but there's a few people I want to introduce today whose books you can go read if you want to learn about architecture, and I'll get to their names here in a minute. But I want to start with the idea that our architecture and the buildings we live in and where we spend our time and what we're looking at affect the way we think about ourselves and the way we live and the way we think about other people and all that at a really fundamental level.
Okay.
And I want to do a little thought experiment, okay? So imagine some giant, modern architecture, very cool looking building. Imagine it in your mind, okay? What is the perspective from which you are imagining it right now, Sumo?
I'm imagining it from the clouds.
Looking down on it from the clouds, right?
Yeah.
Because that's when a photo is taken of a modern building, that's always the perspective. Because that's the perspective that it looks cool from a helicopter or up from above in the clouds or far away. Now, I want you to take that same building, go all the way up to it. Excuse me, I have to sneeze.
That you may. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's okay.
You might have AIDS.
That's test tube.
I got to work on that. Yeah, test tube. Oh, test tube goo. Okay,
yeah,
never
we're
mind.
fine. We're fine.
Okay.
So, all right. Imagine that same building. You go take a person and take him right up to it and plop that person down right up against that front of that building. And then back up a little bit. Now what do you see?
I see a big thing of either concrete or glass.
Okay.
It's like a big block.
And there's like a little person just kind of standing there?
Yeah.
Up against a concrete wall?
Yeah.
Like maybe he's being lined up to be shot?
Yeah, like maybe that.
Yeah. Or maybe he's in line. Maybe he's in line to get his ration card. So
okay, good.
You've taken this person, you've plopped him down in front of this building, and he looks tiny. He has no way to relate to this building. There's no handrail. There's no window for him to stand in and look into or out of. There's just this big sheet of glass. Whatever. It wasn't. The modern architecture is not built with consideration of the human person.
Right. It might even be what you would call de-incarnated.
Yes. Or it's if you really want to get nutty about it, it's some sort of altar or obelisk to honor some some weird spiritual entity that looks upon it from a distance, right? So it's like
I've often wondered that.
Who's supposed to if I build a giant black cube somewhere, who am I building this for? Because it's not for the human that's going to look like an ant next to it. The
Romans used to put inscriptions to their gods on the top of the aqueducts because they thought they would be looking down at them.
That maybe similar. I'm not going to go ahead and claim that's what's going on in modern architecture, but it might be a thing.
I think that's probably 100% what it is. That's our verdict here. They are building it as all skyscrapers are built to honor Zeus.
There you go. It wouldn't surprise me if that ends up being true. But you combine that with the fact that I guess consider you take a person and you put him in an environment that's unfit for the normal equilibrium of human living, and you're gonna that person is gonna have problems. In fact, there were some studies done on this, and it was determined that people that live more than three floors up above street level start having increasing rates of mental problems, psychological problems, because of their disconnectedness from society and the isolation, the loneliness that they feel being way up in this high rise.
It's almost as if when one is disconnected from the earth itself, one begins to have problems.
Or just for the combined energy of social life. You know, when you see, I don't know if you're like this, but if I'm on Instagram or something and I'm flipping through stuff, I follow photography, architecture stuff, and the beautiful street scenes that are so pleasant to look at are never between two giant modern high rises. They're in some little town or some village that may or may not have been built a long time ago, but it was designed as if it were built a long time ago. And what I mean by that is narrow streets, little stoops, nice places to gather, awnings, windows opening out to the street so you can interact through the envelope of the building. All sorts of little design cues that make the buildings and the streets themselves a place where it's positive for human life and human interaction. And when you break it down, building things according to human capacities and at human scale, in a way that flourishes human interaction and human life, I think that is probably the best way to think about so-called traditional as opposed to modern architecture. Modern architecture doesn't consider these things. Traditional architecture does. And so I want people to start thinking in terms of building their own homes and designing their own houses, choosing the place where you're going to live. Because I know not everybody can build a home. If you're looking for an apartment somewhere, if you're moving to town, you can learn a lot about proper pro-human architectural design that's going to enable you to choose a much happier place to live. And so everything from the layout of your room all the way to how many stories your building is, all of this has principles that can be put toward the furtherance of human flourishing.
Right. Man is the measure of all things.
There you go. There you go.
And when we try, this is people that don't believe that build these giant monstrosities.
Yep.
And it's also, this is a point where even though I am what you would call right-wing-ish, this is where I totally agree with the people that are worried about the environment.
Yeah.
Is that we build these cities that are complete monstrosities.
Yep. Overcomplicated.
And they're overcomplicated. They use way more resources than are necessary. They pollute. They hurt the local animal life, because it's all this trying to build this. I don't know. It is sort of trying to build these things for people from looking down on us from the sky.
Well, you're taking a bunch of people, you're putting them in a technocratic cage and disconnecting them from the harmonies of the created order. And I say the created order on purpose because I'm coming at this from the idea that God Almighty made the world in a certain way, and even though we've done some damage to it, that the created order is an order that we're made to live in and derive our living from.
Right.
And if you're living in a 40-story penthouse, like, you have zero connection to that, and it's going to cause you all sorts of harm.
You can do it. Here's my experiences with cities. Okay, so I'm going to use 3 examples that come to mind now.
Okay.
One is, I think you can get this problem 2 ways, horizontal and vertical. One is New York City, right? New York is a vertical. It's exactly what you talk about, these giant obelisks that go up, and everyone is they're like in these columns, and you go up, and then you're disconnected from everybody, and it's weird, right? It's a weird environment. That's why there's a lot of depression in there and stuff.
Yeah.
The opposite of that, or maybe not the opposite, but the wingman of that is the horizontal. Like, I went to Houston not long ago, and Houston is a nightmare.
Oh, dude, yeah.
It's like
Dallas too.
It's like 100 miles diameter circle of sprawling traffic and just repeated. It does look like a cancer. It's like, this is a cancer on the face of the earth. Like, what has happened here?
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So those are 2, and so you can disconnect vertically or you can disconnect horizontally.
And that's a beautiful way to put it. And in one of the books that I want to introduce, it's called The Architecture of Community by Leon Crier, or Crier. I'm not quite sure how to pronounce his last name. His shtick is he writes these really nice books, but he also draws these little comics illustrating his points, and they're all through his books. And exactly, there's errors of weird repetition and sprawl, and there's errors of just keep going vertical and vertical and vertical and vertical. And his whole bit is that all the elements of a society should be repeated, sort of like if you're composing a symphony, you have different themes repeating over and over again in different ways and with variation, but also continuity. So if you're at any point in that city, there's food nearby, there's a community space nearby, there's there's a park nearby, there's some good housing for different people in different phases of life nearby, and you just and it's little bubbles upon bubbles upon bubbles, and each one has its own personality and all that stuff. So that's one of the books, and I'll link these in the show notes. Architecture of Community by Leon Crier. And then another book is called A Pattern Language, and it's primarily authored by a guy named Christopher Alexander, and there's a bunch of other smart people involved here. And that one is more about town planning all the way down to room planning. And it's a book of, he calls them patterns, so it's a rule. So one rule might be your community has to be no more than 7,000 people. If you have more than that, go ahead and start another one, because you're gonna lose.
Cohesion.
And just civic participation starts breaking down once you get beyond that size.
You know what strikes me is, I think a lot of, like, when we look at these classical architecture things, one of the things I think that might have been driving it was this is where I take my left wing that I just went, and I would go back to right wing, because what seems to me like what made it nice was having a wall.
Yeah.
Like, the city had a wall, and not because necessarily it was keeping other people out, but it gave you a border within which this is where we develop and no more.
Yeah. No, that's really important.
You can't sprawl too far because you hit the wall.
That's really important. No, and the ideas of walls and gateways is talked about in a pattern language. It's as you enter a neighborhood, there should be some sort of a gateway, like an arch or a monument or a wall with a opening in it, and the road passes through.
Some sort of spiritual guardian that guards the entrance.
Yeah, because it gives the people living within that space a sense of this is our space, this is our little sub-community, and you can have these little gateways and these entrances. Like, think of the way a river divides a city, and the people on the west and east side of the river, they have their own sense of community on that side of the river. You know, it's not like they fight with the other people over there, but it's just like, me and Sally both grew up on the east side of the river, and we got to know each other walking along the east river bank and all that, that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's again, this is what I mean. It's a biological model. Like a cell has a wall, right? The cell wall.
Yep.
And that divides it from the other cells. And if you break that down, they start to die.
Yeah.
And like Houston is a place where the cell wall has been completely obliterated.
Yep.
And it's just, you can't tell where Houston begins. You can't tell where it ends. You can't even tell really you're in it. You're just in this giant mess.
Yeah.
Right. There's no community anything.
Mm-hmm.
Which is why it was like when I was there, I was watching and they were talking about all the road rage there. Mm-hmm. And it was like there were like 3 murders a day or something, like from people getting out of their cars and just fighting. And I was like, well, no wonder this place is hell on earth.
Oh man.
And it's because you have to, like, borders exist not primarily to keep other people out, although yes, but borders exist to contain your own self. Yeah. Like, here's where we are, and we shouldn't really spread beyond that. If we grow too much that we spread beyond that, we just start a new city with a new wall over there.
Yeah, you've got to give yourself limits.
Yeah, give yourself limits.
That's an artistic and creative principle too. Sometimes I find myself doing design work or creative work of different sorts for my normal job, and I find that if I give myself some tight design parameters, my creativity is much more free within those parameters than it is without them.
Well, yeah, that's the whole point of meter in poetry. That's why free verse is horrible. Yeah. Like a haiku forces you to use 575 syllables, right? Yep. And that forces you to use your language in a creative way. Mm-hmm. Or a sonnet, I forget what the structure is for a sonnet, but anyway, it confines your options, and then that forces creativity.
Yep.
If you have no constraints, you're just like, well, I guess we'll just build another strip mall. Mm-hmm. And then you just end up building 7,000 strip malls in a row, and you're like,
a suburban development like the ones that are going up near where I live. I'm breaking my test tube character, but I guess we had to do it at some point. And the ones that are where I live, they go on for miles and miles. It's miles and miles and miles of nothing but cookie cutter McMansions, and you can't. The suburbs are just as bad as the city high rises. I mean, there's kind of this false dichotomy going on between, oh, I want to live in the suburbs. No, I want to live in the city. And there's nothing to do in the suburbs. Oh, the city's horrible and violent and alienating and all this stuff. Well, they're both terrible. They're both garbage. Just like so many things in the technocracy, you're given a false choice between 2 bad options, and you got to pick one. And the third option is never discussed.
I'm glad that your programming is kicking in so well that you're beginning to believe you're a real person.
Yeah, no, it's
that's really good.
Don't ruin it for me.
Don't worry. If it works, I won't be able to talk you out of it.
Okay, great.
Because when you go to sleep at night, when you go back and plug into the pod, you'll have these very vivid visions of living a full life.
Sweet. I look forward to that.
Out in the world, and that's great. I'm very pleased that we've made such progress in our cloning technology.
Oh, yes. I'll have to thank the scientists later for that one.
Well, you're welcome.
Oh, you did it. Okay. Very good.
I've had to do a lot of work by we do have a few other scientists who I won't name that are part of the project.
Right.
But they're currently in hiding from the New World Order, more so than myself.
Okay. Well, let's keep them on lockdown. So let me just wrap up this section, and then we're gonna jump into some ghosts, right?
Yeah, we're gonna talk about ghosts today.
Oh man. Okay. So some people you want to read about if you're trying to find a place to live or designing your own home, which I highly encourage you to do, even just as a thought exercise, because it is extremely gratifying. You can get graph paper and templates online. That's already, everything's to scale. It makes it a snap, and it's a super fun way to spend an hour designing your own home or apartment or whatever. You want to check out A Pattern Language by Christopher Alexander, The Architecture of Community by Leon Crier, and Get Your House Right by a whole bunch of people, including Crier is also involved with that one as well. And these are
Beautiful.
These are great books. So I feel, I mean, deep down, I'm starting to feel like a little kind of spooky feeling.
I ain't afraid of no ghost.
Oh,
I ain't afraid of no ghost, and that's true. You normally shouldn't be. I'm going to tell you, and in this segment, I'm going to tell you when you should be afraid and when you shouldn't be.
okay.
We're going to break down this is part of like helping people that have supernatural paranormal experiences, but yet, they're pretty normal otherwise, and they don't know what to do with it.
Mm-hmm.
This is going to be, and I have, for better or for worse, had more experience with the paranormal than most.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why. It just happens, right?
Right.
So I'm going to break down for you hauntings and ghosts.
Okay.
And it seems people think it's random,
mm-hmm.
but it has an internal logic to it if you examine it,
okay.
right? And for full disclosure, one of the guys that a lot of this information and a lot of these language of thinking about it. Did you ever see that show Ghost Hunters?
No.
Okay. It's a good show. It was on for a while in the mid early 2000s, and then I think it went into the early 2010s. And I think now it's back. But anyway, one of those guys, ghost hunting shows are silly, but one of them, Grant Wilson, he's actually he was very serious about it, and he still is. He's actually a bit of a paranormal scholar.
Cool.
And so he has a YouTube channel now. It hasn't been updated in a while, last I checked. But anyway, he made some very good videos about this, and I got a lot of my thinking about how to talk about this from him over the years. Good guy. If you want to check it out, his stuff is very good. But we're going to talk about types of hauntings. Okay. So now, Sumo, in your programming, did we implant you with any memories of having a ghost ever?
No, I've never had a ghost.
Okay.
No ghosts.
Okay, good. Now, the thing about me is I have never actually witnessed a ghost myself either. But everyone that I know in life pretty much has,
mm-hmm.
which is strange. Like people come to me like, "Hey, I saw a ghost," and like, okay, so this is one of the more common paranormal phenomena.
Okay.
Is seeing some sort of haunting, and I use haunting maybe more than ghost. Okay. Mm-hmm. A ghost is separate from a haunting, but we'll use them somewhat interchangeably for now.
Okay.
So there are 4 main types of hauntings in the classification system here. Mm-hmm. There are 4 main types, and we're going to go through all 4 of them. Number 1, maybe most common, is a residual haunting.
Okay.
Does that make any sense to you? Just the words. What does that make you think about? A residual?
Like Slimer flew by and he left some green slime on the corner of
the
dresser.
No, not like that. Residual is first of all, a residual haunting is a non-intelligent haunting.
Okay.
There doesn't seem to be any sort of intelligence operating behind it. Okay. Mm-hmm. It appears this was coined. I forget who was the guy that coined it. A fella in the early, I think in the 1950s, he coined this term, stone tape, the stone tape theory. And his idea about this was that the materials in the world, mm-hmm. like just maybe the stone under the house, maybe the house itself, maybe something, we don't know, had recorded this information somehow, and then under certain conditions, it was played back.
Oh, okay.
So a residual haunting is basically like a videotape or an energy tape, we might say, being played back. Mm-hmm. It doesn't interact with anything. You can't talk to it. It doesn't have any malicious intent behind it. It doesn't have any good intent behind it. Mm-hmm. It's just literally a repeat of something that happened. Usually something that happened several times. So classic example is a woman, you move into an old house, right? Mm-hmm. And you start hearing footsteps in the kitchen. Okay. Or you hear maybe the sink turn on and you go up there and the sink is not on. Mm-hmm. And what that is usually a residual haunting of maybe the old woman that lived there for decades beforehand, who had a very routine lifestyle and would get up at the same time every day and go do the same things. And that left an impression on the environment around her that is then, under certain conditions, and we're not quite sure what those are, is played back. It appears to be, though, that a lot of hauntings, this is one of the reasons it's associated with being spooky, quote unquote, is because electrical activity seems to set it off. So a lightning storm may make this haunting more likely to happen, which is one of the reasons why it has this trope of like a dark and stormy night, right?
Oh, okay.
Because not because necessarily that there's any malicious intent behind it, but because the electrical activity may set off the recording to happen. This explains a lot of stuff.
Okay.
This is why ghosts walk through walls, as it were. This type of ghost, anyway, because they're not going through the wall; they're going through a place where the door used to be.
Ah.
That makes sense. Right. So they're not, especially if a home's been remodeled, right? The ghost will go through. They'll walk the same track. They pay no attention whatsoever to what has happened. It's just an exact playback.
Okay.
They go through where the door used to be. That's also why they appear to hover or fly, because they're going up flights of stairs that are no longer there. A classic case in Britain, you know, they have the old Roman roads in Britain from the Roman Empire.
Yeah.
There's a city there, and the name escapes me at the moment, where there's a famous residual haunting where people will, not very often, but often enough that it's become sort of an urban legend, see armies of soldiers walking across the place, right? Except that they're walking and about their thighs below are in the ground.
Oh, weird.
But that's because over the years, that where the road was has sunk and new ground has come up over it in the past 2,000 years. But they're still walking on the same exact road. Right? So
the road bed is still buried there.
The road bed, yeah, it used to be on the surface where they were walking, but now where they're walking is under the surface slightly. That's why some ghosts appear to be half cut off. They're in the floor. Like, what is that? It's because you've added a new foundation. You've done something to the building that has offset where the level was. And that's why very oftentimes in old houses that have had work done, people will say, well, I saw the whole thing except for the feet. It's because the feet are at the lower level where the house used to be.
Weird.
So,
okay.
This is a residual haunting. Now, what do you do with a residual haunting if you have one? Well, first of all, you don't have to do anything. Understand that if it doesn't interact with you, it's not like attacking you. It's not scaring you, purposely. It's just doing the same thing every day. It's not dangerous. It's not going to do anything but that thing. So one thing you can do is just learn to live with it. It's not going to hurt anything. It's just the ghost that turns on the light every now and then or whatever. But if you do want to get rid of it, if you're just very uncomfortable with it, what you have to do is figure out what the energy is attached to and get it out.
Okay.
So let's say, and oftentimes the ghost will give you some clue to that based on what it's doing. Like, for instance, here's an extreme example. Let's say you hear the ghost of a child riding a tricycle down the hallway. Okay. Well, is that tricycle still in the basement or is it out in the lawn? If so, if you get rid of that, see if it goes away. Right. If it doesn't, then it's something else.
Have there been any case studies done with this idea?
Well, I don't know of any academic studies, but this is a practice that it's done fairly often by paranormal investigative teams that seems to work. This does seem to help people.
Okay.
If you can figure out what it is and remove it, then now sometimes what it is the house itself, or it seems to be, right? I mean, this whole field is sort of nebulous because of the topic. So
they don't get a lot of research grants.
Right. So if you are, if it's the house itself, not much you can do, right? You may remodeling may help. You may get out the pieces that have the most recordings or whatever. But and these things do tend to fade with time, right? So over decades, the activity it has like a half-life. It decays away because the energy, the trapped energy, the recording degrades and it stops happening so often. This leads to weird things. Like there's one case of a woman, there's probably more than one case actually, but sometimes people say they'll be haunted and they've been living in the same house for a long time. And it turns out it seems that they're being haunted by a younger version of themselves.
Oh, weird.
Because it's not a spirit, right? It's just somehow the energy is being replayed. So as a kid, say they did the same thing every day or very often, or they would come home from school at the same time, throw their backpack on the ground and run, right? Then that person may hear sometimes at like 3 in the afternoon or 4 in the afternoon, the sound of door slamming and then footsteps running across real fast.
Okay.
It's not a spirit. It's just them being replayed from when they were younger. Right. And I know that sounds weird, but you can haunt yourself in that way.
So
okay.
Is there, am I supposed to understand that there is some sort of weird quantum physics thing happening here? This recording and playback mechanism that is theoretically explainable within like the natural world. It's not this. It seems like a non-spiritual explanation that you're giving.
Well, here's the number one in Maps. We make no distinction between the spiritual and the natural.
Ah, okay.
They are the same.
Okay.
They are the same. But number two, yes, it does seem to be there's some sort of mechanism here that's unidentified.
Okay.
Happening. Because this is so that's number one. That's residual haunting. This is probably the most common, to be honest.
Okay.
Is a residual haunting. If you live in a place over a bunch of granite, a bunch of limestone, a bunch of quartz, that tends to make it more likely too. We don't know why. Something about those stones. But if you look at maps of like places that report the most hauntings, and then a map of geological surveys, it's like a 1-for-1 hotspot. It's very strange. I don't understand it. That's why it was called the stone tape theory, because we thought, well, maybe some types of stones somehow record this. We don't know.
Well, it's sort of like if you take a nail and you hold it up to a magnet long enough, the nail carries a magnetic charge for a little while.
Exactly. It's very similar. Very similar idea.
Okay.
So that's number one, residual hauntings. Number two, intelligent hauntings. And by intelligent, we're going to specify human.
Okay.
This is what most people think of when they think of a ghost. This appears to be the soul or spirit of a dead person that is still in the place. Okay. Now, why do we think it's a person? Well, I'll talk about next inhuman hauntings, which are things like, let's say, demonic activity. And there's a tendency, a bunch of Christians especially have a lot of problems with human ghosts because they don't know where to fit it into their theology.
That's what I'm wondering.
Right. Okay. But here's one of the reasons you may think here's a good piece of evidence to think that that there's a difference between human intelligent hauntings and demonic or angelic intelligent hauntings, and that's because the human ones do not respond to religious invocation.
Okay.
So if it is a truly negative spirit, like an inhuman spirit, it's actually they almost always and perhaps always respond to religious invocation, like invoking prayers, symbols, signs. They seem to actually not like that. Okay. But these other spirits, it doesn't seem to register with them. And these are also the same spirits that don't appear to be particularly malicious. They do appear to be intelligent in that they interact with you and they do different things, but they are not like for instance, if you hold up a cross and cry out in Jesus' name at them, they don't go running away. Okay. Now that to me is a pointer that they may not be demonic. Right. So that's one of the ways you think about that. Okay. So, an inhuman intelligence. Now these things are they may do things that seem malicious. Okay. This is an important thing. You have to put yourself in the perspective of the ghost to understand. Like they may shout or scratch or shove you, right? But that's not necessarily malicious. Like a lot of people will report being pushed, scratched, shoved, like something like that, right? When they're in a haunted house. Right. This is more than likely the ghost trying to get your attention. You have to imagine there's some sort of veil. It's very difficult to sort of put into words, but communication across the realms appears to be difficult, right? And so they may be sitting there in the room trying to get you to hear them, and you're just not doing it. And they try shouting, and you're not doing it. And so eventually when they're trying listen to me, and they start getting a little more aggressive about it. Okay. It's not because they're being mean. They just are trying to get your attention. Now, sometimes they are being mean, right? But most of them are just very frustrated people. Now, how can this be?
How did one end up in this position?
Exactly. How does one get here? Well, this how do you fit this into your various theologies? Okay. Well, so it is basically you're imagining some sort of purgatorial type scenario.
Okay.
Right? There is something that they're here and they can't let go of. Maybe they are maybe they could not let go of their spouse and they're jealous and now they're in there with someone else. The jealousy is keeping them here. Maybe they're angry.
Right.
Maybe they're feeling embittered that these bad things happen to them, you know? Maybe they are, who knows what it is, right? But there's some problem they have not been able to either get over or repent of or whatever. They're not like sinking down into hell, but they're still sort of trapped.
Okay.
Right? And this is why these things also have a half-life, because at some point they will get over this and they will move on.
Okay.
Right? This is why you don't have caveman ghosts, because wherever like this, people are always like, well, why are ghosts always like people from the 1800s or whatever, or like recent? What about the ghosts from, prehistoric times? It's like, well, there aren't very many of them because they're either their residual energy has decayed away or they have moved on.
Okay.
Right? So this is how you get intelligent hauntings. Number 3, and perhaps the strangest. Well, I'll save that one for last. Let's do number 3. Let's do poltergeist.
Okay.
Poltergeist. Some people use the term interchangeably, but I think there's a distinction to be made here. Poltergeist comes from the German, means noisy spirit.
Okay.
Okay. Now, the poltergeist is something caused by a living human being. All right. Now, I know that seems a little weird.
So, like telepathic.
Something like that.
Okay.
And the reason you may think this is, one, again, they're not intelligent. They don't interact with people. Their actions seem to be completely random.
Okay.
Like just things knocking off the shelves every now and then, things opening and closing, like, that sort of stuff. That seems completely random. And they tend to be associated with chaotic times in people's lives when they're highly emotionally charged, and very often women who are either prepubescent or menopausal.
Interesting.
Women do this more than men. Men can't have poltergeists, but this is where the trope of a witch comes from. But like, say a menopausal woman, and she's entering a different phase in her life. She oftentimes her children are growing up or have grown up and are out. There's a lot of chaos in, especially a woman that's maybe going through a divorce at the time or whatever.
Right.
These manifestations of things will begin to happen that aren't in her control. And then also it will, after the time of chaos has ended, they will subside. That's a very good, like if your house is only haunted for like a little bit, right? That's a good indication that maybe it was and there's no like interaction. It's just random things happening. That's a good indication that it was a poltergeist caused by somebody.
So, well, could you make your own? I mean, can you be your own poltergeist?
You can totally be your own poltergeist. Yeah.
So if I'm going through like deep psychic grief and stress, I could perhaps affect my environment with some sort of, by some means, to open and close cabinet doors and stuff like that.
Well, it's usually a form of violence, like something slamming shut or being thrown off the wall or whatever.
Okay.
Because you are so angry and whatnot. It's not under your conscious control. It's more of a psychic outburst.
So it's like things that if I was really angry, something that I would do had I less self control, like throw a book across the room. Exactly.
Had you less self control, right?
Your Geist does it anyway.
Right. This is one reason why it's so difficult to study. The poltergeist is the hardest version to study because it is random and uncontrolled.
Right.
Like, it's just like someone will report, like, I don't know, things like fly off the shelves, and it's like, does this just start happening? It's like, yeah, just recently. And then like you talk to them a year later and it stopped.
Okay.
Right. And so that's a clear, like, this is something probably caused by you. and it's much more often if you're a woman. Women have a lot more deep, uncontrolled rage.
Okay.
It's just seems to be true. Okay.
Yeah, okay.
I think it's because men can let their rage out. They go to a boxing gym or something, or they go shoot a gun or something.
Mm-hmm.
And women could do that, but they most often don't, and so they just pin it up inside until they are psychically throwing things off the wall.
Interesting.
Okay. Number 4, and this is the most confusing and controversial, is inhuman hauntings.
Okay.
Okay. What we mean by that, this is an intelligent haunting. It's not residual, and it is of some sort of entity or spirit that is not human and was never human.
Okay.
Okay, so this falls into roughly 4 categories, 2 of which are going to be sort of familiar, and 2 of which are going to go, I don't know about that.
Okay.
Right? And that's perfectly understandable, and I'm sort of with you on some of it. Okay.
That's kind of been my position throughout this whole segment.
I don't blame you. This is a hard thing. Like, I would not take this so seriously had I not had so many people in my life not brought this up repeatedly. Mm-hmm. And also, I think you have to think about for the Christians out there that have trouble with the ghost thing. Mm-hmm. I will just point out that it is completely biblical. The Witch of Endor brings up the ghost of Solomon. A.
Okay.
And B. The apostles believed in ghosts wholeheartedly, so it's probably okay for you too, because they thought Jesus was a ghost when he was walking on the water, and they also thought he was twice, and they thought he was a ghost when he appeared after being resurrected. Oh. So they were twice afraid of ghosts. So I think if Peter and James and John believe in ghosts, you can believe in ghosts too without being in serious heresy. One of the things is people, you're put in this position because the apostles believed in all sorts of strange things, and you're put in this position of being like, well, they were sort of like the fathers of the faith, but they were also like dumb yokels that believed in silly things.
Right. I don't prefer to think of them as dumb yokels in any case. I feel like that's when we come off as smarter than God.
I agree 100%, but a lot of people are put in that position when you say, "Oh, it's silly to believe in ghosts." Like, well, the apostles did.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. So I'm just saying, if Peter was okay with it, and James and John were okay with it, and Andrew, you're probably okay in at least entertaining the idea that maybe ghosts could be a thing. Okay. So this is the inhuman ones. Ironically, the first 2 are going to be things that most people will have the least problem with, and that is demonic and angelic hauntings.
Okay.
Most people will accept that. Right? For some reason, we have a trouble with human souls sticking around, and I sort of understand that. But we have no trouble with demonic or angelic. Right. For some reason, people have more trouble with angels interfering with you than demons, which I haven't figured out. But so we'll start with angelic. Now, the first thing to note about angelic hauntings is that they really don't happen. In that angels don't seem to haunt stuff. Mm-hmm. They tend to, when people report an angelic interaction, and we'll define this as a apparently supernatural interference in their lives that is overwhelmingly positive. Okay. That's the easiest way to think about it. Okay. Like they were I'm reading a book right now. It's called Endurance. Mm-hmm. About one of the early, I think it was 1914. It was during World War I. Antarctica. They were trying to cross Antarctica on foot. And there was a bunch of problems, and they got in really bad shape. And this is where he reported when they were out trying to cross one specific section, they seemed like they were going to die. He called what he called the third man effect. He said there seemed to be another presence with us that would just make things easier than they should have been. Ooh. Right. It's and people in extreme scenarios, this tends to happen when you're going to die, but it's not your time to die. And so you get divine interference about it.
Okay. I have a story about that at some point.
Okay, good. Okay. We'll hear that. I know what it is because I programmed it into you, but we'll go through it in just a second. Good. Now the exception to that, angels do seem to quote unquote haunt, which means to stick around for a little bit, in cases of prolonged distress and or on the deathbed. Okay. Angels will seem to, a lot of people will report frequent visions of an angel, usually the same angel, while they're in the dying process, especially if that process is drawn out over several months.
Okay.
And that appears to be either some sort of angel sent to comfort them or lead them to work out whatever repentance or things they need to forgive in their lives. It's there. It's sort of guiding them like, hey, you need to get your house in order because this is ending soon, buddy.
Right.
So in those sorts of cases, angels do appear to temporarily haunt, meaning stick around.
Okay.
Okay. But under normal circumstances, angels don't, they pop in, they do their thing, and then they go away.
Okay.
Okay. Now, the second one is the demonic. And this can be characterized, and I have known someone personally that suffered from this. This can be characterized as a supernatural force that is overwhelmingly negative to the point of causing physical destruction, like to the point of prompting you to either self-harm or to harm others.
Right.
Okay. Now, the thing about this is, what you have to understand is most people will not experience this directly. Okay. Because this is like, as the Bible again says, sin is like a lion waiting at the gates, right? These demonic entities are like predators in that they only go for the spiritually weak and sick. Okay. The lion on the prairie doesn't go after the big healthy wildebeest. It goes after the wildebeest that's sick or has a bum leg, right?
Oh, gotcha. Yeah.
They're very similar here. People that already have some problem, maybe they have been a rape victim. Maybe they have raped somebody. Maybe they are addicted to some drug. Maybe they're engaged in some immoral practice that they're deeply ashamed of, but keep hidden. Almost always the vector is shame, right? There's something you can't admit to the public that you do in private that you're deeply ashamed of, or that have done or has been done to you. Okay. That's the vector of attack, because the way it perpetuates is you never speak it. And because due to the shame. All right. So the path of, again, demons they cannot create things. They are fallen creatures. All they can do is destroy. And so they don't come up with there's no innovations in the demon world. Right. And so there's this thing called, Grant calls this the path of possession. And it is overwhelmingly predictable. It happens the same way every time. And this is how you can begin to identify it if it's happening to you or others, right? Number one, it will begin with some sort of obsession. And I mean like obsession to the point that it becomes paranoia. You begin to think people are out to get you. You might obsess over some problem. You might like trying to figure out, it may even be some paranormal problem, like some paranormal thing happens. I got to figure out what this is. You begin to obsess about it, right? Okay. And the obsession leads to isolation. That's when the problem gets really bad. This is when the person withdraws from society. They may go out from time to time to secure basic things. They may go to their job even. But when they come home, they don't talk to the outside world. The blinds are drawn. The house begins to deteriorate, right? And they begin to go inward and inward and inward. Okay. That is when it starts getting bad. Now, because if you remember Job, the devil's not allowed to do anything with Job. He's not allowed to kill him. He's allowed to do everything else, right?
Right.
There appears to be rules to this game, right? And what the rules are, we're not quite sure, but they need you, in order to take full possession, they need you to give up and allow it. And so what they try to do is break down your will by making you increasingly despondent, increasingly isolated, increasingly depressed, to the point where you just sort of give up. And then they can take over. It's sort of like a loophole. Like they don't get to kill you, but they can convince you to kill yourself. They don't get to kill other people, but they can convince you to go kill other people. The prime examples of this, like the most successful, would be like, say, Jim Jones, a cult leader that gets everyone to drink poison Kool-Aid, right?
Right, yeah.
And what does that involve? It involves isolation. Like a cult isolates the group members. You isolate them. You don't let them talk to the outside. Yep. You bring them into despair, dependence, and then eventually you go for the kill stroke. Now, the reason these demonic things, one of the ways you can tell is that religious invocation almost always works, right? When you begin praying, or you bring in people to do some sort of cleansing ritual, whether it be, like some sort of exorcism, they tend to always go away temporarily. That's important. As Christ says, when a demon goes out of a man, he wanders in arid places. But when he returns, he finds the place swept clean, and he brings in 7 more like himself. And the last state of the man is worse than the first. Right? That's 100% what happens. Because again, they're the wounded wildebeest. If a lion is attacking a wildebeest, and other wildebeest gather around and drive him off, right? That's fine for now. But when they go back to grazing, that wounded wildebeest is still wounded and he's still a target. Okay. In order to fix the problem, you have to. All the exorcism does is buy you time to fix the problem.
But you got to get healed.
You got to make the person a healthy wildebeest again, or they will come back. That's guaranteed. Okay. So if you know someone suffering, and I have known someone, what's his wake up call? He was lying in bed at night. He had become a very isolated person. There was some, I of course won't name any names or anything, but there was some sexual violence that had happened around him, and it had made him very shameful, and he had withdrawn into himself over the years. It was a long process. And one night he was alone after having been alone for a long, long time. And he woke up to this just presence of extreme terror and dread that he said he's never felt in his whole life before. And he felt like it was on the cusp of him just grabbing him. And he said, I felt like something was grabbing at my soul in my feet and trying to pull my soul out of my body down to hell.
Whoa.
Right. I just felt like so terrified. And that was a huge wake up call for him. And he sought help, and he's a lot better now. But some people don't seek the help. Because whatever happens, especially if it's something don't assume someone's suffering this problem that they've done something horribly evil. Yeah. But there is something that they're unwilling to bring up. Right. Almost always. There's some point of shame and if you can get that out of them, if you can get them to speak it, that breaks the hold. Because that's the act of repentance. If you're like, there's this thing, it may not even be something they did, but something they're ashamed happened to them. Right. But if you get you can get that to come out, then the demon loses its hold. Okay. That's inhuman type 2 demonic. Whoa. Now we're going to talk about inhuman type 3. And inhuman type 3 is where most people I will lose. Except that, I don't know what to tell you. It seems to happen. Okay. Okay. This is an inhuman intelligence that seems neither demonic nor angelic. Religious invocation does not work. It doesn't do anything. They do not seem mean. They do not seem good. They seem completely benign, but they do interact with people. And some people call these things elementals, meaning they are some sort of spirit of something else. Okay. Maybe the spirit of the forest. I've often wondered if Bigfoot is just a forest spirit. I don't know. Or maybe the classic example of this, and one that my mother has seen in person, is a will-o'-the-wisp. A will-o'-the-wisp is a light. They're calling spook lights in America. They're a light floating through the forest that it appears to be like this orb of light walking through the forest at night. Right. Weird. These things, there's plenty of documented spook lights. They're even videotaped. The Arkansas spook light is probably the most famous in America, but there's, I think, about 10 or 12 documented spook lights in America that are fairly popular. Okay. There are, and this gets into this, the reason this is a problem is because it begins to sound like an animist, and I am sort of an animist because that seems to make the most sense. But there appear to be, and this is, everyone in the classical world was an animist. That's why they're called animals, because they have anima, which are spirits, right? Okay. And there are, and I just know, this is basically, and you don't want to use the word because it makes you sound retarded. But I'm going to use the word because I'm not going to be afraid of being retarded here. Okay. In Maps, we're not afraid to be retarded.
That's probably a good thing.
And we're not a terrorist organization.
It's also good, yeah.
Right. But this is basically the phenomenon of what you would call fairies. Okay. And I don't mean Tinkerbell.
Mm-hmm.
I mean the traditional Celtic Irish idea of fairies, which is the same as the Japanese idea of the kami,
Mm-hmm.
which is the same as the Native American idea of these like land spirits, right? It's these spirits that exist. Just they're not angelic. They're just there,
Mm-hmm.
right? They're like and they interact with you and they do things, but they are, or in Iceland, they would call them elves. Same thing.
Okay.
In German, they called them either trolls or they called them kobolds, right?
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things I want to point out to people listening that may have theological problems with it is that for like 1,000 years of Christianity, there were no problem whatsoever. That's why fairy tales are a thing, right? Because they 100% accepted the idea that you could have elves and these other spirits and these weird things, but just don't worship them, right?
Okay.
That was the thing. So there are these spook lights, and if you want to go out to Arkansas and see the spook light, you stand a pretty good chance because it happens more often than people are comfortable with. So that's number 3, and then number 4 is this is the one I don't necessarily even think may be real, but enough people talk about it that I will bring it up.
Okay.
Number 4 of the inhuman intelligence is what they call thought forms, or tulpas.
Okay.
This is similar to the poltergeist phenomenon. This is a segment. This is an intelligent portion of yourself that you've projected out into the world that's doing things that you're not in control of.
Okay.
What you might think of this as is the best version of this. The most common is an imaginary friend.
Mm-hmm.
Children have this a lot, and it's something they've conjured up. They interact with it as if it is having its own will and volition.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't act like they're in control of it, right?
Right.
Now, where it gets weird is that sometimes in the house, parents will notice that the imaginary friend seems to occasionally do things that are noticeable.
Interesting. Okay.
Okay. So, and now sometimes may be that they're the child is interacting with a ghost that you can't see because children are better at that. But it may sometimes be a thought form. Another thing of this is, you remember in Fight Club, Tyler Durden, how he was like
Yeah.
That's sort of that too. It is like except in that was more of a split personality thing, but there's some point of his psyche that is broken off and is doing things apart from him.
Okay.
Okay. That's basically the idea of a tulpa, or a thought form, is that a lot of authors have reported seeing this. You get really into your character and you make them and all this. And then they'll say, the weirdest thing, I ran into my character in real life on the street.
Oh,
and you're
strange.
like, no, you didn't. No, you didn't. And I agree with you. I'm one of those people that says, no, you didn't. Mm-hmm. But again, it's one of those things enough people happen to independently that I have to say, maybe.
Okay.
Now, what's really probably the most interesting bit of this one is what's called the Philip experiment. And this was done in 1972 in Toronto. It has been repeated successfully at other times, right? But they did a seance. Seances are usually made to try and contact the dead. Mm-hmm. Okay. Which don't do. I'm against necromancy.
Don't do it.
But what they did was not that, because they manufactured a ghost. They came up with this character. Mm-hmm. They gave him a life story. They said when he was born, when he was died, what he did, who he was married to, the names of his children. None of it was real, right? But then these 7 people got together, and they documented this with audio and video footage, which you can watch. I don't think it's the most convincing video footage, because you can, again, this is something that could have been faked easily.
Okay.
But nonetheless, it's there if you're interested. They tried to do a seance to conjure up this fake guy named Philip. Mm-hmm. And the thing is, they were successful. Now, and they got things to happen in the room, right? The table would move, that sort of thing, right? Mm-hmm. It would respond to questions. Okay. Now, the thing is, there's a couple of explanations for that. 1, they're faking the whole thing. Mm-hmm. Very, very possible. 2, they summoned a demonic entity. Maybe.
That was my first thought.
3, there's some sort of collective psychic event happening. Okay, which could be, and I've often entertained the fact that maybe people worshiping ancient gods in the past were creating some sort of collective psychic activity. Mm-hmm. That this is why those things, because psychic activity does work. I mean, we all accept that. That's the whole, if it didn't, placebos wouldn't be a thing, right? You can.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Right. We think like, oh, faith healing. Like the medical establishment is psychotic because they say, faith healing's nonsense. But any new drug better do better than faith healing to get in the market. By the way,
Right.
Like, you gotta perform better than placebo, which does work.
Yeah.
Right. So, and placebo can have some amazing effects. So there is some sort of psychic effect, but the trick about the psychic effect is there has to be a convincing enough story to where you don't think you're doing it. Like you have to take the pill and think it's doing something in order for your subconscious to do the thing.
Right.
Because you need a way to release the subconscious to do its thing where it's not under conscious control. And that could be what's happening in these seance, these ritual experiments, these magic events, is that your psychic abilities are coming through because you're allowing them a cover where you're not, you give them an excuse to operate outside your conscious control.
Gotcha.
Right? You can say like, oh, it's a ghost. And then that allows you to do it without taking responsibility for it.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, no one wants to be responsible for their own superpowers.
They want to be bitten by the radioactive spider.
They want to be you want to be bitten by the radioactive spider. You don't want to admit that maybe, right? Because think about it, it causes a lot of problems in your life if you realize you're a faith healer. Now you got to go and like heal all the cancer patients, and it's just a whole thing. So if you can say like, oh, it was the placebo that did it, right?
Right.
Now, okay, that's a lot. And also it raises a lot of questions about what you are and the nature of yourself, right?
So that does, this whole placebo thing just really makes me think about when somebody says it was the placebo effect, they're really just sort of glazing over some really powerful idea there. And they're just sort of poo-pooing it out by calling it the placebo effect. But no, that's a pretty big deal when you think about what's going on there.
I know. And that's what Maps is going to try to get you to see, is that almost all of culture is designed to make you think things are normal. And they just paper over all the inconsistencies and say, oh, yeah, it's just placebo effect. We do that all the time about so many things. And actually, no, there are weird things that happen. Like people do occasionally get gray aliens in their bedroom at night. And they may or may not be extraterrestrials. I'm of the camp that they aren't. But, there are these weird things that happen. Psychic events. Psi phenomena is a hill I will die on, because that is the most documented in the most controlled conditions.
Right.
It's not very powerful, but you got to think about it. If you have a spirit that can move your body, then already you've admitted that the spirit can move matter. Right. You're just saying if you say it can't do it out, it's like, well, why couldn't it do it without? Like, what are you talking about? Why couldn't it do it outside the body?
Right.
People are like, oh yeah, I have a spirit and it controls my body, and it's, and I'm a good, faithful, religious person. Of course I have a soul, but the soul can't do anything. But it's like, well, that's an inconsistency right there.
It's moving your body.
Right. It's moving your body. It's already there. So why not move it a little outside your body? Right. Why not? I mean, it's not a very powerful effect, but for instance, Stanford, or Stanford, I forget, whichever one. They had a paranormal research group for about 20 years. Right. And this is a very, they did good work, and they reproducibly, if you have a pendulum swinging, a low friction pendulum, right? You have it swinging. If you have a guy sit across the room and concentrate on it, trying to slow it down, he can make this motion of the pendulum stop so many seconds faster. Like, say it takes 3 minutes or so for it to slow down. He can make it stop in 2 minutes and 57 seconds. And you do that over and over again. Right? It's a very small effect, but it does happen. And so how big can that effect get in extraordinary scenarios? I don't know. Maybe it can make these Philip experiments work. Maybe it's just a hoax. But, that's something we're going to explore. And we have an open mind here. In this house, there are many rooms, Well,
it kind of makes me think of the mom lifting the car off her kid in a car.
Exactly. It's, you don't know what you're actually capable of.
Yeah.
People have all these experiences where they have shared dreams and they have visions of the future and stuff. And it's like, well, where's all that coming from?
We'll have to talk about my shared dream experience sometime.
Yeah, I know that that there was a that was a shared dream with a past clone of yours.
Oh, is that what that was?
He I mean, I don't want to ruin it for you, but he
Okay.
that was the last thing he experienced before he got run over by the train.
Okay.
It was a very tragic thing.
You have to read me in on that.
He got tired of living in the bunker and he wanted to go experience the real world, but he didn't know about trains.
Okay.
And it was the first light he'd ever seen, and he ran towards it, and it was not good.
Oh, poor guy.
Yeah.
Well, I won't make that mistake.
I still feel really bad about that one.
I'm gonna stay safe in my bunker.
It's a lot of emotional labor that I have to put into making and then watching die all of these clones.
Yeah. Oh, I'm gonna try to do better than the previous guys. Got you some
Yeah.
slack.
I mean, I don't want to. I know I could easily cast me as the monster here, but really, I'm the one suffering.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure. Well, hey, if you want to wrap, I'll close with my my angel encounter story.
Go for it.
Okay, so I was about 9 years old, 10 years old maybe. I was at summer camp, and we would take a trip to this gorge where you hike down to the gorge. There's a river running through it, and there's pools you can swim in and rocks to slide down, and it was a cool day. And in this one spot in the gorge, part of the river, it's not a big river, small but fast moving, would shoot under this flat rock. Okay.
Right.
And if you got in front of it, you could dip in there and it would just shoot you out the other side. You'd go through this underwater tunnel, which is insanely dangerous, and I cannot believe they were letting us do this. but they were, and so these kids were dropping in and popping out on the other side. And I was right there along with them, having a good old time. And I said, I'm going to go through head first. Okay? And so I dip in there, and I get in there like head first, face up. So I'm facing the rock, and somehow I get disoriented or confused, and I end up trying to get pushed out a hole that I won't fit through. And the water is rushing against me, pinning me into this spot. I guess there was more than just a channel in there. There was some space in there. And I realized, like, I'm stuck. I'm going to die. There's no air. It's all water under there. And I'm stuck, man. And then all of a sudden, I can see from above the rock that I'm under. So I'm like hovering 15 feet above the thing, and there's a man there, and he reaches up under the rock and grabs my foot and pulls me out by the foot. And then suddenly I'm back into myself, and I'm somehow against this very strong current. I'm pulling my head. I've grabbed the edge of the rock, and I'm pulling my head out from under it with the current pressing against my back. Gasping for air. Yeah, I don't know. It was a good 6-7 feet that I would have had to, if I had swum out of there, swim against the current in the dark, totally disoriented. And I don't believe that I was capable of that. And so I think that was an angelic lifeguard yanked me out of there by the foot. No, it was crazy. I came out of there feet first against the current, feet first.
Yeah.
And I don't have any other way to explain it. And that combine it with the fact that I got to witness the thing from 15 feet overhead. It's hard to describe what that was like, but it was a trip, man. It was an absolute trip. I'll never forget it.
Yeah, man, my Maps' memory implantation technology is really, really exceeding. I mean, that was great. Normally they sort of recounted in sort of this haze, but that was very vivid. A lot of people have similar experiences. In later episodes, I will recount angelic experiences I'm familiar with, but
cool.
That was beautiful. I'm glad that this version is working out so well.
Excellent.
So anyway, Maps, everyone listening, become a Maps member. Keep listening. We're gonna mobilize. We're gonna get a rank. Yep. We're gonna do science. We're gonna publish journals about this stuff. It's gonna be fantastic.
Can we tear down all the fake dinosaur skeletons?
All of the fake dinosaur skeletons are going to be torn down.
Sweet.
Every last one of them.
That's a personal beef of mine. Okay.
Right. We don't do terrorism and we don't do eco-terrorism.
Okay,
but
that's
maybe
good.
we'll do tear down dinosaur statue terrorism.
Okay. I mean, that's not terrorism though.
Exactly.
No, it's not really.
Good. Remember to you need to take your vitamin E, especially. Clones are very susceptible.
Okay, I'm gonna take my vitamin E.
Just remember that.
Okay.
All right, I'll see you all next time.
How dare you?